You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to One Bite is Everything. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima. Here on this podcast, we start with the food on your plate and follow the threads outward because food is never just food. It connects to health, climate, business, culture, technology, policy, and the economy. It connects rural and urban, farmers and eaters, innovation and tradition. It connects all of us. Food is one of the few true commonalities we share, and when you really start paying attention, one bite is and can be literally everything. Today's episode is one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a long time because it pushes that idea further than usual. This is a conversation about food, yes, but it's also about climate, technology, marketing, psychology, and systems. And more importantly, it's about how real change actually happens. My guest is Josh Dorfman, a climate entrepreneur, author, and media personality who has spent his career translating big, urgent ideas into solutions people actually adopt. Josh is the CEO and host of Supercool, a media company focused on real-world climate innovations that cut carbon, increase profits, and improve modern life. He was previously the co-founder and CEO of Planted, a carbon-negative building materials company named one of Fast Company's world's most innovative companies. Some of you may also know him from his earlier work as the Lazy Environmentalist, a brand that became a television series, radio show, and best-selling books. What makes this conversation different is that it's not about shaming consumers or asking people to do everything perfectly. It's about systems. It's about momentum. It's about designing solutions that work with human behavior instead of against it. We talk about why adoption matters more than awareness, why the best ideas succeed when they make the better choice the easiest choice, and why progress does not have to be loud or instant to be transformative. It can be built step by step while still heading somewhere really big. And for those of you who care deeply about the future of small and mid-sized farmers, I want you to listen closely because what we're really talking about here is how innovation reaches the ground, how ideas move from theory into fields, factories, homes, and communities, and how farmers, often without being framed this way, are already on the front lines of climate solutions and systems change. As we head into 2026 and beyond, this episode is an invitation to open your mind to possibility, to think creatively about how food connects to everything else, and to imagine what becomes possible when we build systems that support people, farmers, and communities instead of asking them to carry the weight alone. This conversation may shift how you think about climate. It may shift how you think about innovation. And it may shift how you think about what it really means to support farmers in the future. Let's get into it.
I started my career with a lens on more individual choice, what you could do in your individual life as a consumer, how you could move in a more sustainable direction. And that shifted over the last handful of years, probably the last 4 or 5 years. And actually, what really shifted it was we built a company in North Carolina making building materials out of grass instead of trees. And we're up in Oxford, where we have our factory. We've taken over an American Spirits cigarette factory.
Wow.
And now we put a machine in there. We built a machine, first of its kind, that takes a mill, which is like the size of a small town, a lumber mill. And we grow this really fast growing grass, or rather we have tobacco farmers growing it for us, kind of like bamboo. And we turned that into building materials in a machine. It's about 140 feet long, sliced the grass, put a little resin on it, put it into this continuous press that we built in the States, probably the first time that's been done in at least half a century. And out the other end comes structural building materials that are now going into 100,000 D.R. Horton homes, largest home builder in the country. And so that is a carbon negative story, right? We pull carbon from the atmosphere, we turn it into materials that don't give it back, right? Because there's no smokestack. So we lock it into the material and then store it away in new homes. So what I see today is a lot of innovation like that, that is actually scaled up, that is structural, that is systemic. So you're not actually asking a consumer to make a choice. That choice is being done for them because there are solutions that work for the businesses that are now adopting and really doing this at a much larger scale than anyone could do this on their own.
And you're selling that product into sort of traditional building operations?
Yeah, and that was key. I mean, and that's kind of the climate innovation that I get very excited about. So when we made that material and went through our R&D, we tested all sorts of biomass, hemp, bamboo, waste materials, you name it. And you could, for example, build a very strong product out of bamboo. The challenge is that it's too strong.
I want to pause here because this is an important detail that could be easy to miss. Josh isn't saying bamboo is bad. He's saying that innovation only works when it fits into real systems. Planted didn't succeed by making the strongest material possible. They succeeded by making a material that worked seamlessly inside existing building practices. Same density, same fasteners, same job site experience. This is a theme you'll hear again and again in this conversation. The best solutions aren't the flashiest. They're the ones that remove friction and make adoption inevitable.
We had to design a panel that had the same kind of density and kind of nail-in factor, pull-through as the wood materials that builders use today. So it's exactly the same on a job site. So everything is meant to be drop-in, seamless. Nobody knows the difference, except that maybe it's actually a slightly better material than what they're used to working with today. But that's crucial, right, for adoption, is that the climate solutions, and this is what I get very excited about, actually function just like everything they're replacing, if not better, because you're not only brushing up against perceptions of, oh, is this sustainability, am I going to have to pay more, which is also not necessarily the case, and not in our case either, but just inertia, just acceptance of mediocrity. This is the way it always is. It's more pain for me to move to something, right, that's actually better than what I'm doing today, but I'm used to the pain that I live with. And so you just have to overcome all of that with something that's really super cool.
So this is like the nexus of farming and engineering, a big idea, but also psychology. How do you manage all of that to success?
Yeah, that is a very good point. The key is to really hone in on storytelling and also just understanding, despite everything I've said about inertia, most companies, most people would like to be moving in a more sustainable direction, provided that it is easy, no downgrade, and kind of fits the narrative that they want to tell themselves, right? And then on top of that, I think the psychology is really telling stories about, hey, this is where the world is moving. If you want to be innovative and you want to move where the world is going, this is it, right? And this is de-risked so that what I'm going to show you, this innovation, this material, this technology that's going to cut your HVAC by 40%, for example, and cut your carbon, is being used by your competitors. And so when you bring this to your boss or your CEO, you're going to get thanked, not fired, for actually showing up with the climate innovation, because this is really where markets are moving today. All of that plays into a psychology, almost like this FOMO, right? Like, oh my gosh, I need to be paying attention to this. Otherwise, I'm going to be left behind. And the reality is that globally, $2 trillion was invested in clean energy last year. It will be $2.2 trillion. Now that's solar, wind, EVs, geothermal, battery storage, you name it. This is the first year it will double fossil fuels. And if you extend that out between now and 2030, you're talking about $10 trillion in investment going into clean energy. That's 2 times more than the biggest predictions for what's going to go into AI. And so keying into that message and that story is once people buy in and sort of get their head wrapped around and believe it, then you get a lot of like, holy cow, I didn't actually know that this is happening. Now I feel validated, cutting edge, and I'm part of this change because this isn't just about doing good. This is really about the business opportunity.
I'm curious on the practical side. On the ground in North Carolina, you need to grow this grass, and you've got tobacco farmers who I'm imagining they're looking for a more future stable crop to grow. What sort of the different kinds of reactions you had on the ground?
The agriculture side was really interesting. And North Carolina is a very
Always
interesting
is.
place to do this business. When we started investigating this business, so that goes back about 4 years. One of my first calls was to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. And one of the things I found so fascinating was that phone was answered by a live human within 3 rings. And every time I got transferred to another department within the North Carolina Department of Ag, there was a human on the phone who was very helpful and very interested to help. Within agriculture, and I think this is really, I mean, it may be particular to agriculture, but I think this probably is reflected in many states. The government really wants to help their farmers find a path forward. And it's not just that tobacco is declining, which it is, but it's also that companies like RJ Reynolds are leaving regions of the state where they were formerly very formidable, right? And tobacco farmers could rely on that crop. We have the backing of the North Carolina Department of Ag. We actually found this particular biomass that we use, this particular grass, through the Department of Ag. They were testing a whole bunch of things over the last decade as a potential use for ethanol, right, that could potentially replace corn and grow in North Carolina. So we looked into a lot of R&D.
What's important here is that this innovation didn't come from Silicon Valley or a lab disconnected from the land. It came from listening to a state agriculture department and to farmers who were already looking for a future beyond declining tobacco markets. Planta didn't ask farmers to change who they were. They offered a new path forward that respected existing knowledge, land, and livelihoods.
That opens a lot of doors. That brought a lot of credibility. And then the conversation with tobacco farmers was very interesting because you have a whole farming population that's aging and is very concerned about what's going to happen to their land. How do they keep it in production? Will the next generation want to come into the family business? With a crop like ours, the economics are very strong, stronger, in fact, than tobacco.
This is where the story really clicks. As tobacco demand declines, farmers in North Carolina aren't just losing a crop, they're losing stability, generational continuity, and a reason for the next generation to stay on the land. What Planta did was identify grasses that could be grown by former tobacco farmers using familiar infrastructure while plugging into a completely different economic future. This is not about nostalgia or replacement. It's about transition that works.
And for the up and coming generation, it checks 2 boxes. It's economically sustainable and it's environmentally sustainable. And so it has the feel good for them. And they also see, okay, this actually gives us a path to keep this land in production and feel really good about that. So there's been a lot of buy-in. And then I would say strategically too, I mean, we hired our head of ag, a woman who was working for the extension arm of the government, helping farmers understand what crops they could grow. She was awesome. She loved what we were doing. We called her up. We're like, hey, why don't you come do this with us? And she's a soil agronomist as well and brilliant PhD in her own right. So we made those kinds of moves and the reaction from farmers has been excellent.
I love it. About how many farmers do you have working on this project?
Well, we have a handful in North Carolina. We also bleed up into Virginia, where we're working with a co-op in Virginia as well. And just a strong pipeline. I mean, we're only 4 years old, so we're growing now in the hundreds of acres. And soon that will get into the thousands of acres as we scale out production. But we have to plant more land in advance of production, right? Because we need this crop to get established. And that it can take a year or two to really get to kind of maturity of where we need that crop to be. But the potential is amazing. And the response from the farming community has been so positive and reinforcing. And it's such a tight-knit community. If you screw it up, you screw it up for good. So we're very mindful, right? Everyone will know. And if you do it right, that message will steadily spread, right? It doesn't necessarily spread like wildfire, but you build that reputation over time. And you also build it by, I mean, we're in Oxford, right? We're about 45 minutes north of Raleigh. We're in a traditional farming community. And it's our values and it's a good fit, but like we're part of that community. That's also on our production team. That's the operations team in our factory. I mean, we have, I don't know the exact number today, but it's probably something like 2/3 of our hiring is local. And then we have all these SpaceX engineers we brought from Los Angeles to come, work as well. Somehow we convinced them to come. So it's a really neat mix.
Let me go just a little bit further back, and you've touched on this in terms of making things easy for people. What exactly should you be doing to help the environment from, I guess, your lazy environmentalist kind of space? I'm interested to understand how you got into these easy ways and what you underscored. I feel like people don't know exactly what they can do to move the needle. If I buy a hybrid car, is that going to move the needle? Is it really? Is recycling working? I think there's a lot of concerns, and I think people want to do a good job and they want to help.
For me, I wasn't raised thinking about the environment. I was certainly raised to think broadly, internationally. My mom had wanted to go into the State Department, had done an internship in Paris and gave that up in the late 60s, 70s to start a family. That was important to her that we had an international mindset. And we're thinking about what was happening in the world. And so in the 1990s, when I finished college, I went to China for a couple of years. I actually thought I was going to be a spy. And so I was like, this will be a good move. Let me go get some, let me sneak into the country. I was teaching on a university and I got a part-time job that became a full-time job working in a bicycle lock factory. This was in Nanjing, 1995. And so perhaps you can imagine in a developing China, a little different than China today. It was amazing. I would show up with my packs of Marlboro cigarettes and hand them out and try and make friends with all these engineers, learn as much about the culture as I could and all the different facets of it, whether or in the business world. I was a sponge. And I went to work for the company that owned that factory full time. And a couple of years into that experience, we were opening factories all over the country, and it was really remarkable. But what started to occur to me was here's a country with 1 billion people riding bicycles, right? That was the primary form of transportation. But you could see in the short time I was there, highways being constructed start to finish in months. Just the most insane infrastructure build out, really of all time. I mean, historic. And so at some point, I started to realize, like, holy moly, there's 1 billion people here riding bikes, but all these people are going to be driving cars. I don't know anything about climate change or global warming, but where's the oil going to come from? What is that going to mean for wars in the Middle East? Or what does that mean for the US? What does that mean when India develops and they all get cars and Eastern Europe develops and they all get cars? Because that's the idea we're exporting from America. We actually want this, right? This is globalization when we were pro-globalization, not like today because the world actually caught up and now we're like, oh, hold on a second. No, we didn't mean outcompete us when we said you should be more capitalist. But in that journey, what I started to key into was this idea of resources. And if the world is going to develop and we want the world to develop and we want everyone to raise their standard of living, how do you do that when you're brushing up against the finite resources of a finite world? And it was visceral for me because I felt like I'd seen the future. I knew what was going to happen in China. I was given a glimpse and I could just never get away from it. I mean, I came back to the States, late 90s, went through the dot-com boom bust, worked for a dot-com, went to business school, did all that stuff. But I just could never lose that feeling of, holy cow, I know what's going to happen. How do we actually make this math pencil? How do we live as well as we can, but do it sustainably? And so
it is the question.
It's still the question. And so for me, as a young person in my mid-20s, when that was all very fresh for me and very vivid and thinking about those things for the first time, I moved into this very activist-y climate space. Since I was a kid who grew up in a middle class and then upper middle class home in Westchester County outside of New York City. What that mostly meant was that when I came home and would get around my folks or my brother or my friends, they would just be like, great, here he comes to make us feel guilty again. Thanks so much, Josh. And I just came to realize I'm holding all this anger, all this fear, all this concern, and I'm not changing a thing just because I'm upset and feeling this way. And I was getting my MBA and I was going to protest against the World Economic Forum and the World Bank. And all my MBA friends were like, what are you doing, dude? And I was like, I just don't know. I'm a very confused person. And through that confusion and working through it, I just came to the view that, you know what? I did grow up in Armonk, New York. I am this kid and I do like stuff and everybody likes stuff and we're a consumer culture. Instead of trying to fight the system, how can I work within the system to see if I can surface just better choices, make the green choice the best choice, whether it's design, style, hit the price point, whatever it needs to be. And the good news today, to your question, should I buy a hybrid car? What should I do? When I look across the innovation landscape today and I look at what are the products that are going to be in people's homes, like what's the next stove they're going to get? You see companies like Copper, this is just one example, but you see a company like Copper that has built this kind of next generation induction range stove, right? So you're cooking with induction, which most of the top chefs today would rather cook on induction than natural gas. This is not about a sacrifice, get rid of your natural gas, right? But the way that they actually solved the challenge for people who would like to have induction range in their homes, the challenge of not having to have a new electrical panel and go get an electrician and run a different voltage outlet to your kitchen, which is not there. It's going to cost thousands of dollars. They put a battery inside the stove. And so what that means is you can plug it into the same outlet as your Cuisinart. The battery will charge all day. And the 3 times during the day where you need all the power to cook, now you got it because there's a battery inside. And then if you have a blackout, well, that battery can also connect into, say, your fridge and keep your food from spoiling. It's just better living.
So they found their biggest friction point and they got rid of it.
And yes, and so one, that's good for consumers, but two, when you have huge buildings that want to renovate and upgrade, and they're thinking about electric, and in some places now that's getting mandated, like in New York, where a lot of building owners are thinking about they will be penalized if they're not cutting carbon. If you can move to a solution like copper and you don't have to tear out all the walls and actually run new wires, the math 100% pencils out to actually move to a solution like copper rather than trying to do something else and keep natural gas in that building. I mean, so it works for a consumer and it works on this larger level. So now imagine it's like, hey, I just want to rent an apartment. You know what? I don't really care if it's natural gas or I haven't really thought about it. But the default is the better choice for cooking, the better choice for the planet, because the builder saw that the economics worked for the builder to put 500 of these things into a huge apartment building. And now you don't even have to make the choice yourself. And that's where I think is so exciting about the world we live in today. It is this systemic change. It's like, everyone wants to talk about, not everyone, but like reduce, reuse, recycle. If you go to a Lakers game today, or you go to a concert at the Crypto Arena in Los Angeles, everybody's reusing. Every cup is reusable. That is the system that they've put in place. So no one has to think about it anymore because the infrastructure is in place. That's the world we're starting to move into. That's what I'm very excited about.
So to some extent, we, the general public, we're relying on people who are innovating, who are finding support for that innovation, and who are injecting it into the systems that we already have, that we already use, whether it's a stove or a car or all of those things. Help me with the day-to-day life of a regular person. What do? I mean, they're not going to buy a stove every day or a car every day. And so maybe they have some of these basic components in their life, but what can they do?
I wrote 2 books about this years ago, like 2 lazy environmentalist books. Buy this, not that, right? Here's the eco-friendly fashion companies, tons of companies like Patagonia. I recently interviewed this guy, Mike Faraday, who runs a big clothing brand called Faraday, which is now nationwide. And they use sustainable fabrics that are the highest quality. And you wouldn't even necessarily know that they're one of the most sustainable brands, but it's just embedded in how they operate. And there's so many opportunities like that. That all exists. The best thing that anybody could do, in my mind, is you could think about where you bank. Almost guaranteed anywhere people are banking today, their savings account, their checking account, the dollars in that account are helping underwrite fossil fuels. Because all of the major banks, certainly in the US and most abroad, that's still what they're doing. They're underwriting fossil fuels. There are companies, and the most prominent one today is Climate First Bank. It's one of the fastest growing banks to get to $1 billion in assets. Accounts are FDIC insured, so your money is safe up to $250,000. they finance solar projects. Your money actually goes toward other types of investments that are more in line probably with your listeners' values, with my values. And you just wouldn't know the difference. It's actually a simple shift. You're putting your money to work while you're going about it just like you do today. You're just putting your money to work, for something that's more aligned with your values, 4% interest rates on your savings. I mean, it's all the stuff that you would want from a primarily online bank.
One of the most overlooked climate actions happens quietly every time you deposit a paycheck. Many major banks use the money sitting in everyday checking and savings accounts to help underwrite fossil fuel projects, oil pipelines, gas expansion, and coal infrastructure, often without customers realizing it. That means your money can be funding climate destruction, even if your lifestyle choices are sustainable. To understand this, people can look up their bank's climate record through independent reports like Banking on Climate Chaos, review whether their bank finances fossil fuels, and ask their bank directly where deposits are invested. Switching to a credit union or a values-aligned bank that funds renewable energy, affordable housing, and local communities turns passive money into active climate action. In a system where trillions of dollars shape the future, choosing where you bank is not just a financial decision. It's a vote for the kind of world you want to live in.
But in truth, what I would say is don't worry about it. And I know that's a weird thing to say for someone who spent much of their career focused on it, but it is really not up to the individual to try to figure it out because the systems just need to get fixed. I mean, our recycling rates in the US for plastic hover somewhere between 5 to 9%. You can do all the right things, put all the stuff in the recyclables. It's not going to get recycled in most states because there is no recycling infrastructure. It is negligent. You could assign a lot of adjectives to how horrific that is. I just spoke to a company called UBQ Materials, which has spent probably now close to 15 years inventing new technology where everything in the trash bag. So it doesn't matter if it's the dirty diaper or the chicken bones or the banana peels or the greasy pizza box, which can't get recycled once the pizza goes in because the grease is on it. We just don't think about those things. None of that has to be separated anymore. They take all of it and turn it into effectively recycled plastic that is now going into like Mercedes cars, and McDonald's using it for trays, and Pepsi-Cola is using it. I mean, when I say don't worry about it, it's not your fault. You'll buy an electric car when the price is right and it's the model you want and the economics work out. You're going to get it because it's a better choice. It's inevitable.
I want listeners to really hear this. This conversation isn't about personal failure or individual responsibility. It's about designing systems that work for people, farmers, and communities. That's where lasting change lives.
You're going to get all the things that I could tell you about for your home because going electric is just a more pleasant experience. There's the first company in the world called Quilt that actually makes this like ductless mini split air conditioning heating system. It's these guys from Google. They just launched it last year. Just like an electric car, it's the first air conditioning heating system in the world that automatically updates on its own. It gets more powerful. You just wake up and you have a more powerful system that actually does a better job of heating and cooling because you have technologists and really smart people who are figuring this out for the humans. And people are going to start buying Quilt, not because they want to save the planet, because it's the system that knows you the best, that actually has all the AI and all the good stuff baked in, and it just cuts your energy, makes your home more comfortable. You're just going to get it. And I just think like having been in all this stuff for 2 decades, we're actually now in that moment where the momentum is now so strong. These solutions are going to copper, these are going to become more household brand names much sooner than later, just because they're so much better than the dumb stuff we buy right now.
I appreciate you letting all of us off the hook a little bit, but I'm curious what your take is on the climate in terms of climate innovation, given that our politics have shifted a little bit away from climate being A, valid, and B, important, and what impact that has on this whole movement.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment for all of the things that you're alluding to. To me, focusing on this now every day, talking to leaders across industries, these different types of climate companies, my view is there's actually never been a better time to start a climate-focused company than right now. Just in terms of the innovation, the market readiness, the investment dollars flowing into it. It doesn't mean it's not without its challenges. Of course it is. But customers really are open to adopting solutions that will save them money. And I do find that the best solutions today, not all, but the best will save money. And the trick is just like you're saying, the media has deprioritized the climate story. And certainly when the media does tell the climate story, it is some catastrophe happened somewhere, right? Someone lost their home, some storm hit. The news is negative when climate's being covered. You have an administration that is antagonistic at best, and it's probably a little bit worse than that. And so that certainly colors people's perceptions as well. All of that is real. And that is very much a US challenge. At the same time, you have China, which is increasingly viewed as the bad guys. But China is so far in front and not stopping in terms of where they're moving. And over half their cars today that are bought, the new, are electric vehicles. The pace of innovation is unbelievable. I mean, all the solar panels practically that we use around the world, probably 90+% come out of China. And that's the cheapest form of energy. And so that's a countervailing force where it's like, no, this isn't our national security interest to actually address this gap here, where if we allow the future to be manufactured and built in China, what does that mean for the future of the US and our economy?
China's real climate power lies in manufacturing, and that's exactly why it's seen as a growing threat to the US economy. China produces around 80% of the world's solar panels, roughly 70% of global lithium-ion batteries, and over half of the world's electric vehicles, helping drive solar costs down by more than 90% in the last decade and making clean tech cheaper everywhere. But this dominance also means the industries that will define the 21st century economy, energy, transportation, and grid infrastructure, are increasingly built overseas, not in the US. When one country controls the factories, it controls jobs, pricing, supply chains, and innovation. The US risks losing millions of high-wage manufacturing jobs, becoming strategically dependent on Chinese supply during geopolitical tensions, and falling behind on patents and standards as innovation follows scale. In other words, China didn't just industrialize sustainability. It positioned itself to capture the economic upside of the global energy transition, forcing the US to play catch-up in what may be the most important industrial race of our time.
So that's a very tricky time where it's like people aren't really thinking about the climate as much as they were, say, under the Biden administration, because it was more prominent there, where the news is not, to the degree you hear news, it's not awesome. With all that said, today, I think the latest number is like 15,000 cities globally have climate action plans on the books. I've given you the top line number, this 2 trillion number. But you see innovation in places like, and not to disparage in any way Lincoln, Nebraska, but you see innovation in places where I believe it was Lincoln was thinking, hey, we've got all of these buildings, all of these affordable housing buildings that are dilapidated, that are in disrepair. What could we do about that? And they said, well, what if we came up with a grant for building owners? We won't call them slumlords, but we'll just say the building owners, right? And we were like, what if for every unit they had, we gave them a $10,000 grant, and the tenant in that affordable housing could decide what it would go for in terms of upgrades. That could go for better insulation, that could go for things that are cutting energy consumption, and they did it. And then they said, you know what? You don't even have to pay it back, because what we know is going to happen is in the surrounding area where these low-income housing units are, the overall property values are going to increase because we've just increased the quality of what's there. We've just increased the pride in place, et cetera. And so it will be the rising tax base that actually pays for those grants. We will upgrade these units. We will give people a higher standard of living, a higher quality of life, more dignity. They will cut their energy consumption, and it will be a net win for everyone, including the government, because we will get paid back. And they proved it out. And so in my view, it's like, if you can do that in places in Nebraska, you can do that everywhere. And this really is happening everywhere. It's just not always what we're reading about, but the innovation is broad, it's underway, and it's so positive. It's why we started Supercool, the media company we own right now, to get these stories out, not just because it's good news, but because there are real playbooks that can be understood and copied so that this type of innovation can spread.
Let me take it to agriculture for a minute. Farmers are on the front line, on the ground, figuring out ways for centuries to keep their land healthy, to keep their water healthy. All of this is so important to their livelihood. And I'm just curious, what do you think the biggest opportunity is for small and mid-sized farmers in this climate economy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I almost feel like the question should be asked the other way around. And what I mean by that is when we were first investigating agriculture in North Carolina, we went all the way out to Windsor, North Carolina, the eastern side of the state where the farms are very large, where it's flattest once you get east of I-95. And I'd heard about this guy, Fen Rasco, who sat on the North Carolina, I think was the hemp advisory board, whatever you might call it. Somehow, so I got a hold of Fen. And I wasn't actually sure if it was the same Fen who was the farmer, because Fen is also an award-winning painter and does these like beautiful plein air, stunning paintings. And I found his gallery site before I'd heard his name. I called him. I'm like, hey, are you the hemp guy? He's like, yeah, I'm the hemp guy. Come on out. And so I went out with my co-founder, Wada, to meet Fen to talk about potentially growing hemp. We were trying to figure out crops. We're way out in Windsor. We go into this warehouse where I meet these people who are kind of in his farming co-op. And I felt like I was meeting the cast of Duck Dynasty. These guys with like these long beards. And I say this, I live in the South, right? But like as redneck can be. And someone with my background coming in from New York would just be like, it's so easy for someone with my background to sort of write them off. Like, why should I look to them for the expertise? So when I say like I would flip the question, it's clear after an hour, because I do think we were very open-minded in what we were trying to understand and investigate for our crop. But it was so clear that the expertise in like what to do was with the farmers who'd been on that land for years.
This is something I see over and over again. Farmers are often treated as the last link in the chain, when in reality, they're some of the most sophisticated systems thinkers we have. When innovation starts by listening to farmers instead of asking them to adapt to broken systems, that's when change actually sticks.
We learned so much just by spending as much time and just listening. Being fortunate to go into the local barbecue shop that was behind the general store, and you had to know the door to get in and like sit there and just learn. And so I don't know that it's for me to say what small, medium-sized farmers can do. I think maybe it's the other way around. How can we listen to what small and medium-sized farmers know they need and implement that more? Farmers are just so resourceful. And I've seen it in North Carolina. We've explored in other parts of the states as well, all the way to Texas, where we've gotten involved with farming communities. Yeah, I just think that the rest of us have a lot to learn from their resourcefulness. Our climate's changing so fast that we're going to be out of wine and chocolate before too long. And maybe people are paying attention to things like that. They don't want to pay caviar prices for chocolate. It's a really good point. And I know that with our first farmer who transitioned from tobacco to our crop, man, he also just took such a risk with us. So I don't know, if you want to look at like risk appetite, real entrepreneurship, I really have like a ton of respect for, farmers who make a go of it. So tell me, what's the point of Supercool and what's happening? Yeah, the idea behind Supercool, so it's a media company, is to key in on climate innovations that are proven, that are in market today, that are scaling up, taking market share, and really, in my view, building that low carbon economy right now. And so I talk to founders, just like you, I talk to CEOs, we talk to executives of large companies. And what we're trying to do is case study all of this innovation that's underway so that others can learn from it, so that we distill these playbooks. So for example, we recently had on this guy, Jared Delavalli, who runs a company called Alloy. He built the first all-electric, so fossil fuel-free skyscraper in New York City. He's now building the largest, what will be passive house skyscraper, I think, perhaps in the world, certainly in the United States, right next to it. This is in downtown Brooklyn. And you can't do that unless you believe that the technology is there, that you actually can. You don't have to put natural gas boilers in the building anymore. Induction range, which I mentioned. But you can also have to figure out the financing. And so I interviewed Jared. It's really interesting. In its own right, it's a cool story. But beyond the cool story, what I want to understand is like, okay, what's the playbook, man? Like, how do you line up that financing? How do you make sure you have a comfort level with the systems going into the building? How do you ensure that there's going to be customers on the other end who are going to want to move in? Like, let's get into all of this because I think it's really exciting, but I want the next company to be able to learn as well and go faster than you did, right? That's what Supercool is really all about. It's looking across what's happening in buildings, what's happening in cars, what's happening in EV charging, talking to the companies who have figured out not just the cool innovation, but the awesome way to get to market adoption and what adoption levers you pull to get a customer to say yes. And so it's everything from that building I've mentioned to a company that we talked to recently like Forum Mobility, which built the largest EV charging station at any port in the world. And they put it at Long Beach, California, one of the busiest ports in America. And they're trying to move, huge semi trucks, the 18-wheelers, to get them to go electric. And Volvo has a very, highly regarded 18-wheeler. Tesla's going to come out with the Tesla Semi, this 18-wheeler soon. The whole industry is very excited about it. But what the guy who started Forum Mobility realized, he's like, the challenge here is that, when you look at 18-wheelers in trucking, most of the companies in trucking it kind of goes back to farming. They're like mom and pop shops. They're small family businesses. They own a small fleet. It's a big deal to have to go buy a $500,000 truck to replace something that runs on diesel. And so Forum Mobility came up with this novel approach. They said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to provide the truck and the charging and the maintenance and the overnight parking, everything. We're going to wrap that into like a monthly subscription fee. And that monthly subscription fee is going to cost you less than continuing to run on diesel. Now they're killing it, and they're starting to open these stations up along the West Coast. We see other companies like them. And so what's that? Okay, if you talk to the CEO of the company, he's like, look, we're not a technology company. We don't build the chargers. We don't build the cars. We're not a real estate company. Yeah, we own the real estate, but this is about business model innovation. And when you understand the business model innovation, then you can really start to move in industry because you can make the economics work for everyone and you can get buy-in. And so it's that kind of thing that gets us really geeked out and excited. That's what our content's trying to get at. So someone listening is like, holy cow, I didn't know semi trucks were here. That's so cool. But then the operator, the business person who's listening to the show is like, oh my God, they figured out this really cool financing. I wonder if I could use that in my industry too and create this huge unlock to actually, do something that's cool for the climate and a great business opportunity. So Supercool does that every week. We're talking to companies who are running these, and it's not all business model innovation, but it's what's the innovation and then how do you get everyone to buy it? That's super cool.
You are sharing media, right? And you have advertisers. Is that how you're making your company go? Or are you assisting in any of this investment in these models? Or what's your model?
Yeah, our business model for now is we're really actually trying to be as pure play media as possible. I say that and now I actually think back on all the products we built. But yeah, it's a weekly podcast, a weekly newsletter where we really go deep on this playbook that I'm describing, fast growing YouTube channel, all the media stuff. But we also launched a course a month ago. I took my background, what I've learned from Planted and elsewhere I've been, and how you don't just create the innovation, but actually get people to buy it. And then we took about 50 or 60 interviews with these leading climate companies and tried to really examine them and say, are there patterns here? Are these companies doing the same things to not build the innovation, but to get people to buy it? And what we found was like, yeah, there's a set of, roughly 5 levers, so to speak, these adoption levers that the world's best climate companies use to get customers to buy and then scale that up rapidly. So we just launched a course. It's the Climate Adoption Playbook, where we distill all that. And, we try to make it fast for operators. It's 8 modules, takes a couple hours to get through, where we're really trying to, again, give you the playbook to go do this yourself. And so it's course revenue, it's sponsorship revenue. We were just talking with a really cool venue in New York for putting on our first, hopefully, national conference in the spring with some partners, which would be really exciting. Try and bring this kind of, not just have it exist in the digital world, this conversation, but bring it offline and have people come connect, innovators come connect. So event revenue, conference revenue, that's where we're trying to position ourselves.
And on the horizon of all of the innovation that you're talking about trucking and all of these different systems. Are you seeing anything on the agricultural front? Just curious.
There's a really cool company out in Idaho called Hempitecture. It's probably the most scaled up of the companies that are using industrial hemp. partnering with farmers. And I think they partner with a group of hemp growers in Montana to take industrial hemp and turn it into insulation for homes. And they're selling nationwide. And so this is kind of like the dream of so many for hemp, that it could actually have this use. So I'm seeing these kinds of climate crops actually turning now into materials that also have that kind of use. We focus on some of the technology companies that are trying to figure out, is there a way to cut the amount of fertilizer you would have to use, or cut the amount of ammonia that you would have to use, and other ways to get some of either those fossil fuels or just some of those real inputs that companies rely on, get them out of the system. We haven't gone as far on that yet, but I'm hopeful that we will in the coming year and beyond.
As we come to the end of this conversation, I want to zoom back out to where we started. One Bite is Everything exists because food is central to our lives. It is personal and universal at the same time. Every single one of us eats, and every bite connects us to something larger, to land, labor, systems, economies, and to each other. What Josh helped illuminate today is that real change doesn't usually come from asking individuals to try harder. It comes from redesigning the systems around them so better outcomes become the default. We talked about climate innovation, but we also talked about psychology and storytelling and adoption, about why ideas only matter if they reach people, and about how the most successful solutions remove friction instead of adding guilt, and about how progress becomes powerful when economics, behavior, and values are aligned. We also talked directly and indirectly about farmers, about their ingenuity, their risk-taking, and their deep understanding of land, systems, and long-term thinking. Supporting small and mid-sized farmers isn't charity. It's an investment in resilient food systems, healthier communities, and climate solutions that start at the ground level and ripple outward. If there's one takeaway I hope you carry forward, it's this. Progress doesn't have to be perfect or overwhelming to matter. It can be practical. It can be incremental. And it can still point us towards something transformative. Josh, if you're listening, I hope this is just the first of many of our conversations. There is so much more to explore at the intersection of food, climate, systems, and the future we are building together. Thanks so much for being on the show. Before I go, I wanted to thank my co-producer, Sonia Dillon, whose thoughtful partnership helps bring every episode to life. And a huge thank you to Russell Chapa for sound design and original music. This show would not be what it is without both of you. Thanks for listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects the food on your plate to the bigger world. If today's episode sparked something for you, remember, the stories you hear here don't end when the episode does. Through the 4 Farmers movement, these stories become action, supporting small farmers and strengthening the systems that feed us all. You can learn more at 4farmersmovement.com, and you can follow along on Instagram at XOXOFarmGirl. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate and review One Bite is Everything on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It helps more people like you find the show. It also makes me really happy because the effort that I put into this show is for you. And Sonia and Russ too. They do it for you. And our guests, like Josh and all of the others this year, we are all here to share important ideas and stories with you. If you want to look at it this way, each episode takes about 5 hours of brain power, in case that motivates you. A 5-star review and a thoughtful rating might take you 5 minutes if you really take your time. And the appreciation, wow. We always celebrate and share your reviews. Just saying. One Bite is Everything. It starts on your plate, and it connects all of us. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima. I'll be back again next week right here, and I hope you will be too. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the show so you don't miss us. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.